Hey there, thanks for joining me at the table again. You might notice that the camera is in a fixed position above the board, and there's some pros and cons with this. Obviously, the pro is you can see the whole board and you're not seeing me, move the camera around. Of course, the con is everything's really far away. However, I do have a pretty cool trick, and that is I have this capability here, so I can bring in units so you can see them close up, and you'll be able to read things a little bit better. And um, let me know, give me some feedback, which mode you like more, the freestyle mode that I was doing or this. We're going to go ahead and try to do this particular video in this type of mode. My only caveat here is, of course, you can't see off the screen, which sometimes with the freestyle mode, I can easily show you stuff off the screen. And I'm just using a green screen effect here. I'm getting rid of some dust that was getting in the way. Another warning is that these green units, of course, are going to show up all wonky. So that's, of course, a big problem. And it's going to be hard to see some of those green units. It's a little better when I put it with a blue background, but green is green. So the camera is trying to take out all the green, hence the term green screen. And unfortunately, the green player is a whole player. So that might be an issue. One of the other options I have is I can, for example, do this and hold it up so you can see it that way, just so you can see that is also that when I go to the green screen. Okay, so hope that makes sense. And let's get going here. All right, so one thing I missed in the last playthrough is right here. So we did bankruptcy whenever the Roman Empire had to spend 10 and they only had $6, right? So we said it ages 2 spaces. We did all these steps, but I didn't pay attention that there's this collapse rule. If an empire is at age 9 or greater and suffers bankruptcy, we have to do a collapse die roll check. Okay. It's really hard to see because it's on the edges of the map, and I put the map in a way that favors the age, which is here. The income track is off the screen, and I would have to like move the entire game board in order for you to be able to see that. It is a little off kilter. I know that the left side, if this was a painting hanging on the wall, I guess I probably need to adjust it a little bit better, like that. But anyways, Rome was here, which I know you probably can't see the board very well being as far away, although it's really funny. My little preview screen that I'm looking at is always a lower quality than the actual YouTube video. I'm usually quite impressed with how well it records this. But anyways, Rome is here, and if you can't see it, this is the 9 space. And then what we did was we moved it 3 spaces because that's what the bankruptcy rule says to do. And I'll come back and I'll show that to you. We had to advance it by 2 spaces. It aged once at the aging step, and then it aged 2 more times because of the bankruptcy. So when it aged once, it was actually at 10. So it's not at the 9, it's at 10. So here's what we need to do. We need to roll a d10. And for every age above 9, we have to add 1 to it. So we're going to add 1. It was not yet in decline, because remember, the bankruptcy didn't happen. It's when you suffer bankruptcy, you do a die roll check immediately. So I think we do that before we apply the bankruptcy steps. So there was no decline marker yet. So we don't have to do that. There is no calamity, and the capital was not conquered. And is there an area controlled other than the capital's area? And the answer is yes. The Romans control a whole bunch of areas, and we can go and cheat a little bit looking at the scenario setup, and you can see that the Roman Empire has 7 areas under its control. I mean, the game basically hasn't even started yet. So they have 7 areas. So we're going to subtract 7 from the die roll. There's a real good chance that this Rome's not collapsing here. And as you can see, if the result's less than or 9, then the empire stands. So let me grab a d10 and let's roll. So I rolled a 5, and it's nowhere close. We had to add 1 and then subtract 7. So it's basically at 0 or negative numbers. So the empire stands, and otherwise it would have collapsed and ceased to exist. So Rome is definitely on the brink, but not quite. Now, I set this up in such a way where my camera, which is above my finger here, it has... I can only put so much paper on here before I hit the stand that my camera's sitting on. So I can't move my paper any closer. So you may see me turn it sideways just so you could see the bottom of the page. I know that's annoying, folks, but that's the only way I could really do it. The one thing I'm very pleased with is that this camera here does a great job of showing you things up close. And so when I'm showing you the rule book, hopefully this will be a lot less glare and a lot less annoying than the other video. Okay, so what step are we at? Let me show you real quick. We finished the time phase. We skipped the admin phase. We are now in the military phase. So we do nation activations, barbarians first, then kingdoms, then finally empires in order of decreasing age, breaking ties in order of increasing nation card initiative. So then we do unit stacks, one at a time, combat, and then campaigns are done after that. So when a nation activates, it does unit stacks first and then the campaign second. And then we end diplomacy. Because diplomacy can occur throughout. And then, of course, a scoring phase. So that's what's next. This is going to likely take several videos to do because there's a lot that happens during this phase. And this is also the part where, since I'm playing all sides, it's really hard because you're trying to come up with a strategy for each country or kingdom or whatever you want to call them, faction. And so it can be a little challenging. All right, I'm going to try to pause this video, which is another nice feature of this system that I'm using here. I need to go get a drink. So I'm going to try to pause it and let's see how this works. Okay, so if that worked like it was supposed to, even though I was gone for 10 minutes, you should not have noticed it. I always get leery about that feature. Okay, so I'm off camera here, just trying to find the section in the rulebook to address where we're at right now. So one of the things that we may want to look at real quick is area of control and how it's determined. And so a couple of things here. The first thing is that, as you know, provinces are grouped in areas. A barbarian area has the hatchet, whereas the Greek column represents civilized areas. Control of provinces and areas gives you victory points. Oh, yes. On that last video, I was telling you I was struggling finding out how do we keep track of victory points. And I was rather disappointed in the answer. The answer is this. We're supposed to just fill out these cards or these sheets. So that was a little annoying. I'll probably have to make some copies of this. They do give you, I don't know, quite a few. So for example, we scored a victory point with, no, we scored no victory points. The blue pt2 was possibly going to score a victory point, but they didn't. So yeah, we would fill out these sheets and just need to be able to make some copies of those. I'm sure there'll be more on Board Game Geek. I pray there will be. Okay, so A nation controls provinces and areas controlled by its vassals. A federator controls the fetus provinces of its federates, but not any other provinces these may control by themselves. So remember, a federate is a barbarian nation, and a federator is the like the empire that's paying them. So the empire will give the barbarian nation, the federate, 2 territories, and when it does, the barbarian nation gets to control those 2 territories as if it's their own. But the let's say it's the Romans that did it, they still control the 2 territories as well. So even though barbarians are controlling and inhabiting the spaces, um, the um, the Romans get to enjoy that ownership as well. They have to pay money every period, and of course that could lead to bankruptcy and blah blah blah. But that's the idea. Um, I think it's probably thematically accurate. It just is an annoying set of rules to the game. Um, and then control of province. This is what we're here for. So what you can see here is a nation controls a province where it has a sufficient number of unopposed units. A single unit is enough to control any province. The threshold for control for a barbarian province is higher. A barbarian nation needs 2 units or a unit and its horde, while a civilized nation will need 3 units, some of which may be federates. So just to control a barbarian province, a barbarian itself needs 2 units to control it, or a civilized nation would need 3. A nation controls any empty provinces in its area. So if it controls the area, it controls all the provinces that are empty within that area. Okay. Area control, as long as it's maintained, obviates the need for military presence in every area province. In order to conquer an enemy province, any city in the province must also be besieged once the enemy army has fled or retreated. If the city holds, the attacker must evacuate the province at the end of the combat step. And this actually led to a question on Board Game Geek that I found interesting. Leaving the province empty and therefore uncontrolled unless the area is controlled. Okay, so somebody on Board Game Geek asked the question, let's say Rome controls a city, and then the barbarians come in and they defeat all the armies or make the Roman armies retreat, right? So then they put the city under siege, but then the barbarians failed to take the city, because that's possible. So then the city beats them back. Well, what the person was complaining about is that if the Romans were to ever re-enter that province, they also need to siege the city, because that city then becomes of neutral alliance and is no longer loyal to the Romans, even though the Romans had it in the first place. So it's a very good point, and I think rules-wise it was an accurate point, except for this section here, where it says that if you control the area, you see it says unless the area is controlled. So leaving the province empty and therefore uncontrolled unless the area is controlled. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that city is also in your control, if that's the case. Now, what does it mean to control an area? Well, it depends on what you are. And that's why this is worth going over. Barbarians, everybody can simultaneously claim control of an area. Allies get to combine their holdings. Barbarians control an area if the only hordes, excuse me, oh, I'm yawning, I'm so sorry. If the only hordes present are theirs, or their allies, or their vassals. So if there's 2 different barbarian units with hordes in an area, they don't control the area at all. They control a civilized area if they control the majority of its provinces. Now, somebody else asked, does majority of the provinces mean that you have to hold more, the majority of the provinces within the area? And the answer is no. You need to hold the majority of the provinces relative to the other players. So if I only hold 1 province in an area that has 6 provinces, and you hold 2, you have the majority, even though the majority in a 6 province area is actually 4, right? That's the only way you achieve a majority if you're looking at the whole area. But it's a majority relative to the other players. Okay, kingdoms control an area if they control the majority of its provinces. Empires control an area if they control the majority of the cities. Note that an empire cannot control an area that is devoid of cities, and an empire has total control of an area if it owns all of the area's cities and there's no hostile provinces within the area. I think that goes without saying. When I read that, I was like, well, when would you not control an area if you had no hostile provinces in the entire area and you control all the cities? I mean, that just seems like it's a redundant point. So controlling the cities is important for the empires. And then it's like, okay, what happens if you have control effects? And it says for each empty province inside the area is automatically controlled. And that's what I mean by I don't think you have to retake a city. If you have area control because you control most of the other cities and you happen to have lost one of the cities, you take it back once you neutralize those enemy troops. For an empire, control of an area generates income, and that, of course, is important to them. So why am I getting into all this? Well, we're going to start doing the military step. So military step is all about control, and you need to understand it. Now, there is another section talking about friendly versus neutral versus enemy, and this is a green screen problem here. What that's saying is, you got the nation itself, you have its allies, and you have its federates, and those are all green, and meaning that they're going to help each other out and they're friendly to each other. A client and a vassal are neutral, meaning that they'll pay you their tribute or whatever, but they don't really want to get involved in your politics. So that's the idea. Okay, so let's get to the meat and potatoes, and that's the actual military part itself. There is a ton of rules on this, and I think, some of you who posted in comments, this was overwhelming, and I don't disagree. So let's talk about some basic concepts. First of all, there is always a stacking limit in everything you do. You get movement points, which they call paces, and a pace is moving from one territory to the next. It doesn't matter how big the territory is. None of that matters. A pace is a pace. So if you have 2 paces, you get to move across 2 different territories. You always have to stop if you encounter an enemy. You always have to stop if you encounter one of these limites, these forts. You can do this thing called, I always forget the name, passage and force, where if there's 1 unit in a province and you have 2 units in that province, you can take every other unit that you move into that area and actually move through that province, and you're not required to stop anymore. When you do movement, the enemy has a chance to do what's called a reaction, and they get movement points as well. And just so you have in the back of your mind, they get 3 paces. And they have to roll a die to see if they successfully intercept you. Because obviously, if you find out that, London's under attack, and you're rushing towards London, you may or may not find the enemy. I mean, obviously, London's a pretty big city. I think you'd find them if that was the case. But I hope you get what I mean. If they're out, excuse me, I'm yawning again. If they're out in the countryside, obviously you could go right by them and not even notice that they're there. So the opponent's reaction, there's a table for whether or not they actually can intercept you. And the odds are worse if you're trying to use all 3 paces to intercept instead of maybe just one of the 3 paces to intercept. Okay, so just as long as you keep those concepts in your mind, and then understand that mountains are a big deal, and then going across the strait is a big deal. There's a lot of rules around mountains and straits, most of which I glazed over and, didn't pay attention to. Sorry, I had to yawn again. I just need to take a nap. That's the thing with this game. It's so exhausting reading the rules and preparing for these videos that you, by the time I start playing, I'm exhausted. Okay, So let's get into the military phase. First, there's the stacking rules. Let's go over them in a nutshell. Oh, I meant to say that uh, when units are moving and you have, a certain number of paces, you can pick up units, you could drop off units, you can do whatever you want. Any unit can move in any. You can move a whole stack. Like, moving a whole stack doesn't save you movement points. It's just, anything's possible. Um, you can move any number of units, see, and you can cross neutral or friendly provinces. Um, you check stacking, and this is a really nice. I mean, the rules are actually quite nice when you find them. When barbarian reinforcements displace another nation, you check stacking. Excuse me. When placing civilized purchases, which these are all during the steps that we just finished. Passage in force, of course. Each time you've completed a unit stack movement, after each movement substep of a leader campaign, which we haven't gotten into, fleeing, retreating, etc., etc. So the stacking limits are actually quite easy. The limit is 4 in all terrain except the mountain where it's 3. And then the leader has a number on the bottom left that gives a plus X. And then during an invasion, remember those are barbarian things, the invading nation receives a +1 stacking bonus above and beyond everything else. There are special cases, as you could see down below. The limus counters, they don't count. And then the horde counter doesn't count towards the stacking limit. In fact, they're not even allowed to be stacked. So, okay, movement. So you can move as many units as you want. Nations move one at a time. Stack may move only if it has its units movement allowance remaining. So if half the stack still has movement points but the other half doesn't, you can just move half the stack. But what it's trying to tell you is you can't move the whole stack unless every unit within that stack has movement points. The stack moves from province to adjacent province. There's no skipping. A stack may also use sea movement to cross up to 2 sea zones. I don't think there's a limit to the number of troops you can load onto. Like, if you have a ship, you can use it to do sea zone movement. There's naval transport or amphibious landing. They're both basically the same. The amphibious landing, of course, being that you're invading enemy territory. A stack including nomadic barbarians may never use sea movement. That's one of those rules I'm going to forget a lot. The vassal of a nomadic suzerain must remain in the same area as its suzerain's horde. Rivers, ridges, and other terrain have no effect on movement except for straits. Rivers and ridges affect interception and flight, however, and that is true. And during movement, there are no stacking limits, so you're allowed to bring everybody together into one big mega stack. But as long as you, at any given point in time, by the time you end all your movement, the stacking rules need to be applied, because you can always just assume that the troops came through one at a time or whatever. Okay, your movement allowance. Each land unit has a set number of provinces it can move. You can't store up movement points. And as you can see there, infantry gets 3, cavalry gets 4. So if you have a stack of infantry and cavalry and you want them to stay together, obviously you're only going to get to move 3 spaces. Barbarian Horde moves on its own set of rules. And the leader increases movement allowances above by 1 extra pace, but only if the units move with the leader during the entire time. So that's the only time you really have to pay attention to that. And then during leader campaigns, units may move only to join the leader or under his direction. Limitus may never move. They are fixed in place. So none of this should have been like earth-shattering or groundbreaking for you. It should have been pretty straightforward. Um, End of movement. It says you have to stop if you're in a hostile nation that's uh, with units of a hostile nation, even if it's a territory you control. Um, Within a barbarian area, other barbarian units do not stop a barbarian nation stacks. Overrun will slow down a stack. Overrun, that's an interesting concept. If you have double the units of the other player, you can overrun that player and basically just kill their unit without even having a combat. Um, then, of course, passage of force. You do need to do a check. So they're repeating themselves a little bit here. Stack may drop off units and continue moving. It may also pick up units along the way. The only limitation is, of course, your movement points. That, by the way, is really hard to track when you have a lot of pieces on the board. So here's an overrun. If a moving stack has 6 or more versus a single enemy unit that did not flee, it can overrun it. It's eliminated without combat. It costs you a pace, so one of your movement points. For all 6 units have to pay a movement point to be able to do that, and you have to have a movement point available to be able to do that. All right, so and then we're talking about passage and force down here. So the limis, the forts. Forts get automatically destroyed if there's nobody supporting them. And then the opponent's reaction is another thing to understand. I know this is really slow grinding, and I apologize, but I want to make sure I get it right. I want to make sure you get it right, because I think we need to be able to try to appreciate this game. So, and I know, again, somebody could argue, hey, Jeff, it's your job to learn these rules and quit making me read them with you. Understand. Just, 6 months after you play the game, I'll finally come out with my video. So, okay, here we go. A nation enters an enemy-controlled province. The controller, which is, the opponent, can react, announcing an immediate interception. So this would pause the movement. So if you still have movement points left, you don't finish. The interception happens immediately. And one of the strategies I think this game has is you can actually force somebody to intercept in one place, and then it's sort of like a feint, and then you're feigning one direction, but you're actually coming in the other way. And if they take the bait and they go and try to intercept your first set of troops, you'll swoop in with your second. I mean, that is a viable strategy in this game. Okay. Obviously, units that are under attack cannot intercept. You have to designate all the stacks that are reacting before you do any interception. A land connection must exist, so you're not allowed to intercept over water. And the maximum distance is 3 paces. We talked about that. And so then it gives some nice examples, but basically you have to roll according to this table, and it's just like unconditional surrender. It has, modifiers. So the combat leader of the bonus helps if there is a leader. The target province contains the opponent's capital. The opponent is an empire, blah, blah, blah. So you have different interception, things. And if you get a result greater than 6, then you succeed. Now, just because you're intercepting, you don't resolve the battle. All you're doing is this is the movement phase. Everybody moves. Then once all movement's done, then you resolve battles. Okay? Flight. You can enter an enemy controlled to province's controller may react, and then basically they could retreat, which is what a flight is. So you can use naval transport, etc. You roll a die. If it's greater than 9, your flight attempt succeeds. If it fails, you have to remain in the attack province, and everything else occurs normally. So, a consequence of a success, the opponent flees up to 3 paces through empty, neutral, or friendly provinces. Hostile province may be entered if overrun, etc., etc. I mean, it's just basically a retreat option. And if you are retreating, you can leave some units behind. Like you leave like a rabbit trail of units if you'd like. A breadcrumb trail, I meant to say. If a leader is present, his combat bonus applies whether he flees himself or not. You can drop off units along the way, like I said. The destination provinces must be friendly or else empty and rural. Stacking limits always apply. A fled stack may never be intercepted. And of course, you can't move a fled stack deeper into territory. You have to move away from the attacker. Okay, so why did I explain all that? Because that's really the combat phase is that. We're going to do movement. We're going to do intercept or flee as part of that movement. And then we're going to do combat. And this is going to go on until we're done with all of our combat and all of our movement and then all of our invasions on top of that. So how far are we? We're 30 minutes in and we're finally getting going. So my apologies there that it took a while, but this is a meaty section of the rulebook. Okay, so let's talk movement. Well, let's figure out who's going first. Barbarians go first, and then I think they said the oldest goes first. So that would be these guys. So I don't know if you can see my pen here. It's these guys right here, which I know is just off the edge of the camera. And I'm going to pick those up and put them over here so you can see we have 4 barbarian units that are all going first. And now which of those 4 goes first? They said we have to look at the initiative number. So the Ostrogoth has 6. The Visigoth has a 7. What's interesting is, did they say the highest number or the lowest number goes first? See, these are the kind of rules that I always forget. Sorry about that. Did you hear Lego store reopening in 2020 was a big deal? Yeah, they were lining up for blocks. If you think the joke was bad, try saying it to a microphone. All right. In order of decreasing age, breaking ties in order of increasing nation card initiative. So lower numbers first. So 6 for Ostrogoth, 7 for Visigoth. What do we have? The Alemanni and the Franki. The Franki have 5. And the Alemanni have... Oh, where are the Alemanni? Oh, here they are. 4. So Alemanni go first. Okay, so the Alemanni, if you're looking at the screen here, is this stack right here. And let me break it down for you. And please forgive me, I got a lot of cords running around to make this get up work. And when I lean across the table, I create issues. So let me show you what's actually in that space. So And what's interesting is they're not even green. I guess they are sort of green. Um, let's see if this helps. All right, so that's pure black. Yeah, that helps a little. Okay, so first thing you have is your horde marker, which we may or may not do anything with. We have a leader who gives a +2 to the stacking limit. So that's what that is. And then, of course, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of all the same type of unit. They are all regular infantry. So this is controlled by the green player, by the way. Hence the reason why we're having difficulties with our green screen. So we have a leader with 6 units and a horde unit. No matter how many times I read the rules about the horde unit, I will always forget them. But but basically, just understand the horde unit does not participate in battles. That much I do remember. Do I have to move them here, or is that a special step? That's the part I always forget. And they are all in one giant mega stack right here in the corner. Okay, so before we continue, I'm going to look real quick at their victory point conditions. So first thing I would do is look at the map up here. And I know it's a little choppy because of the green screen, but basically they want to go into northern France, which is right here. So they're poised to go all the way down into southern France, but that's not really their goal. The big thing here is the victory points. Obviously, they get victory points for killing, but then they get victory points for controlling specific areas. So I actually can't read them when I bring them up to the screen for you, so I'm going to bring them a little closer here and just read it. So they need Lotharingia, and then each of Agri, Decumates, Austrasia, and Burgundia. So you can, Burgundia, that sounds like Burgundy. So let's look at the Burgundia is right here. So that's Burgundia. And what else did we say? Austrasia and Decumates. Where are those? Why don't I see those anywhere? Probably because they're really far away. Well, we found Burgundia. This is Helvetia, Lotharingia. That's one of them. So they want to take this territory and that territory. They are on Decumates right now. Okay, so they actually control the territory, one of the territories they want. And then Austrasia is probably around here somewhere. That's Franconia. So the only one I don't see is Austrasia, and I'm sure it's around here, and I just don't notice it. Right there. That's Austrasia. So they want this territory, and that one, amongst several others. And then eventually Gallia Meridionalis. This is Gallia Septrinus. Gallia Mera is down here, but that's later in the game. Okay, so with all that said, I think we should attack, right? So let's do a move. And in their case, they're going to want to move here into this space with the Libis, like so. And I'll look up if the horde unit can move. Like I said, it doesn't attack, but does it move with them or separately? That's the part I always forget. This is not what's called an invasion. Invasions are on their player aid. And I don't think anybody has an invasion on turn 1. So that's the first thing to understand. Now, if you want to know when invasions and stuff occur, you just look at the timetable, or the actual card for the unit itself will tell you. Actually, the Alemanni card does say there's an invasion this round. Let me show you. Oh crap, I just spilled a bunch of units. Okay, so if you look here, it says plus invasion. Okay, so invasion is basically they get to attack multiple times. And the blue player would be the Goths. But this is the green player, so I'm reading the wrong one. And if you're hearing a grinding, that's my dog chewing on a bone. Timetable. That's what I was looking for. They also have, in the scenario book, they go over each of the races just like we were talking about, and discuss. This is scenario victory points. A little different looking than the card, but you can see here for the Alemanni, if you create a kingdom in Gala, you get 10. If you do the Septentrionalis, you get 20. That's if you create an empire. So it's sort of like encouraging you to create a kingdom in Gala Septentrionalis, then try to do an empire in basically southern France. And of course, you get points if you ever do it elsewhere. And then each, what is that symbol? Each income in non-heretical Christian province income, you get a point, etc. Now, the one thing, and so these are bonus points, and then these are points you get on specific turns. And this is what I was reading to you, is on turn 3, they get points for going into those certain specific areas and having control over them. Okay, didn't mean to beat a dead horse there. I was just trying to explain that there's multiple places you can go to see that. And then this dang timetable. I thought it was in this book. It must be in a different one. So where the heck is the timetable if it's not there? You know what? It's probably here. Okay. Yep, the Alemanni get an invasion. So if you look right there, they get an invasion. So we're going to be doing invasion right off the bat with them. So this will be interesting. I think what I'm going to do is, before I continue, I for sure want to invade that. Let me get this. My dog's going to be barking anyways, so let's end the video. So I for sure want to invade this area right here, but let me look up a few things on the rules so I'm not wasting your time, and I will be back. I'm just going to hit pause here. Okay, welcome back. So the horde can move with the other units. It's just never stacked with them, and that's called migration. But during an invasion, they do get to stack. It's a little weird. It says during an invasion, a horde can move freely like any infantry. Oh, I see. So normally the horde can only move if it's with a stack of other units. But during an invasion, they can move wherever it wants. So it doesn't need to have other units nearby. So, okay. So we want to move to this location here, which if you've got your board at home, it's called Lotharingen. So we're going to that one. The Roman fort, the Limes or whatever you want to call it, forces them to stop. They have more movement points, but they can't go beyond that. Now, since it's an invasion, they're going to get to attack this place and then invade again or attack again, which is another movement step. Now, we have an option to intercept, and I think I'm going to do that because I have a stack of Roman units here that can try to intercept. And I don't know if you can tell, but they are in this space here, which is called, sorry, I gotta get up, Cisalpina, and watch your mouth, Taurinorum, Helvetia, and Lotharingia. So it's going to take 1, 2, 3 movement to intercept that spot. I do have units here, so I could intercept with them as well. And please understand that these Frankie units are controlled by the red player. So these Frankie units do not need to, I don't need to defend against them if I'm the red player. So this is my only threat in this area. So I could try to intercept them with this unit here. But it's only one unit. So, and then actually I can try to intercept with all the units. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So let's move this stack to here and let's figure out what it takes to intercept. And this is not a guarantee thing. All right, so like we said, maximum spaces is 3. And to resolve the intercept attempt, we're going to roll a d10. And the combat bonus as a leader matters. Our combat bonus of our leader is a 3. So we get a +3. If the target province contains the opponent's capital, that's not the case. If the opponent is an empire, not a case. If the land distance is 3 paces, we lose 1. We are crossing a ridge, so we're going to lose 2 more. And we're not crossing Bosphorus, which is Sevastopol, for those of you who are wondering where the heck that is. So I need to roll greater than a 6 to succeed. And then, of course, there's a failure section. Basically, if you fail, you just don't go there. But you can try to intercept somewhere else if you did fail, because you don't actually move. I'm pretty sure that's the rule. It just can't intercept the currently active stack. It can intercept a different one later in the turn. And if it does succeed, it's going to join. And of course, you have to deal with stacking limits of the target province. And you're not allowed to drop units off along the way when you're doing an intercept. Normally you can if you're doing other types of movement or even a retreat, but not in this case. So we are in a bit of a pickle here because we're losing 3 points because of the ridge and the distance. We're gaining 3 points because of our leader, and that's about it. Now, there is a weird play on words. I missed one of the bonuses we get. Right here, it says +2 if the opponent is an empire. And I was thinking, okay, if I'm looking at this from the red player's perspective, the opponent is a kingdom, or I'm sorry, a barbarian. That's not the case. This is the opponent's reaction section. So who's the opponent in this case? The opponent is you who's rolling the die, this person, which is the Romans. The Romans are an empire, so they did a +2 bonus for that. So they're actually going to get a net of +2. Their leader is going to cancel the -3. They're going to get a net of +2. They need to get at least a 6 to succeed. And I rolled a 6. So I barely made it. Well, I could get +2. So I made an 8 out of that. So I do succeed. Well, not I, but the Roman player succeeds in being able to intercept that. So then what's going to happen is we're going to do a battle. Now, before that battle would occur, we would resolve movement everywhere else. But as you probably already understand, there is no everywhere else. This is it. So let me grab the units for you. So here's the stack of units from the barbarians. And here is the stack of units from the Romans. And I was going to try to intercept with this other unit, but I guess not. Yeah, I was. Okay, and then here's what we have for the Romans. And I'm not doing a good job of getting these oriented correctly for you. There you go. And then this is the one that came in from the north. So the Romans have those units, and we already saw these guys, but just for encore purposes, you have that. The horde unit doesn't participate in the battle, it's just moving along with them. Okay, so so one of three things is going to happen. The Romans are going to win, which means that the barbarians have to flee. The barbarians are going to win, which means that the Romans are going to have to flee. Is there a third one? No, there is no third one. I guess the third one is that this particular fort, the Limes, could be potentially destroyed. So that does exist, and it's being supported by the units. So how does this work? Well, first of all, the designer of this game gave us two different battle modes. There's what's called regular combat, and then there's what's called advanced combat. Advanced combat is using 2 dice, so 2d6s. So you're just rolling 2 dice. So let's say I roll and I get a 9. I'm going to add positive modifiers, I'm going to add negative modifiers, and if my 9 is over a certain amount, I do hits based on a table. That's the advanced combat. The not so advanced combat, or the regular combat, relies on these dice. So you have like this black die, and then you have this white die. And yes, that is a red sword mixed with a gray sword on the white die. And the black die also has red swords. So here it is in a nutshell. You're going to earn white dice based on how many units you have and things like that. So you're going to have like a little checklist of what causes you to earn a die. So you're going to earn white dice that you get to roll from that. Then you can upgrade a white die to a black die based on other checks, because the black dice are better. Same goes for the attacker and the defender. Then based on the leader, so right here you could see we have this leader here with a +3 there, or the 3 on the top left. That's how many times he can force a reroll. So if the barbarians roll, this double sword here, that's 2 hits. Well, the Roman player can force the barbarian to reroll his die, or he can force himself to roll his own dice. So now, if you're playing the advanced mode, like I said, you're rolling 2 d6s, and I don't know if I have any d6s close by. Oh, here's one. Yep, I do. So you roll 2 d6s, and let's say I get an 8. Then the reroll bonus can still be used to reroll the dice. In this case, it would be both dice. Whereas in the basic combat, you're picking which die gets to be rerolled, and you only reroll that one. Okay. You can also use your reroll bonus to give yourself an automatic +2 to your die roll, whatever it happens to be. Or you can use your leadership bonus to force the enemy to get an automatic -2. I think the advanced combat seems a little silly, and a couple of things that came to mind with it is if I get 3 rerolls chances, I can force my opponent to get a -2, and then he's going to have to use one of his reroll chances to negate the -2 that I just gave to him. And so you see what I mean? you're going to end up using rerolls just to negate what the other player is doing, and it doesn't really give you any tactical edge in combat. Now, obviously, it gives you an edge if you're a leader fighting against a leaderless army, um, but the advanced combat seems a little wonky that way. So we're going to do the regular combat. The advanced combat actually seems easier to resolve, to be quite honest with you. But let's do the regular. He doesn't even give you d6 dice. So, not that that's an issue. I mean, most people have d6s, but he gives you plenty of this other style dice. So let's jump in and let's go. Yes, there's advanced and non-advanced, and my only recommendation is I think you could probably switch to advanced rules. There's no harm in it. Just don't do it in the middle of a battle. That's the only thing I would suggest. Okay, so I'm going to take these 2 dice away for now, and let's just do the regular rules, which are actually a little harder to understand, if you ask me. Okay. All right, so for purposes of this rule, the active nation is the attacker. So that means the active nation is the Alemanni, the barbarians. The Romans are the defender. I think we're cool there. So every battle consists of an archery round followed by a single melee round. In the advanced combat, excuse me, that's the same thing. There's an archery round, but there's 2 melee rounds. And I find that interesting, but I think it's largely because the number of hits you get in the advanced combat is a little lower than if you were to use these dice, or potentially lower. Also, the advanced combat is a little more predictable. Like, yes, you roll a die, but once you roll your die, you look at the table and you get exactly this many hits based on what the table says. Whereas with this, the amount of hits you're going to get is based on how well you roll. This one's a little more swingy, if you ask me. Okay. So we're going to use the custom dice. A leader allows a number of rerolls in battle. A leader may die. Your leader dies if the stack is completely eliminated. Now, also understand that your leader is going to die anyways at the end of the turn. These leaders are only alive for 1 turn. I guess it's because, each turn represents, a lifetime of years, I guess. Some battle losses do get recovered. So just because a unit dies doesn't mean it dies forever. And the loser will retreat if not completely eliminated. And event cards may also affect combat. So I don't think that red has an event card that affects this, but we can look real quick. So there are 2 tactical advantages in the game. There is a cavalry advantage and a heavy advantage. So that's the next thing to understand. So when you look at the Romans, there is cavalry here and here, right? And there's no cavalry at all over here. So the Romans have cavalry advantage. It's really just my cavalry is bigger than your cavalry. All the puns that go with that. And then as far as the heavy advantage goes, it's the same concept. Rome has 1, 2, 3 heavy units, and they have 0. Now, you may say that this is an elite unit because see the little diamond there, but remember, barbarians don't have elite units. That's only when they become a kingdom. So the barbarians are actually quite, they have both of the disadvantages, even though I think they have more units. Okay, so we, by the way, after the archery round, this gets rechecked. So the archery round happens. All battles are simultaneous. You do the archery round, pew, 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 and some units may die. And if they do die, then it could cause the cavalry and heavy infantry, cavalry and heavy advantages to go to the other side, right? It could flip-flop. But that's not going to be the case here because I don't even think there is an archer unit in this entire battle. So with that being said, we're going to skip the archery step for this battle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Next is a mountains ambush. So the mountain terrain, if you're looking at this, is this terrain here. So what you see here for Greece, that's the mountain terrain. And the mountain terrain, or the terrain that's being attacked right now, is the wooded terrain. So we are in a forest at the moment. So mountain ambush doesn't happen. Leader rerolls. Each leader gets a combat bonus on the top left. That's the number of rerolls. And it's only done during the melee round. It's not done during the archery round. They're not allowed to do any rerolls during archery. And like I said, archery was skipped. Also, keep in mind that you are allowed to forfeit a reroll only one time to add a black die. So if you have, so right here, the Romans have 3 rerolls. They can reduce that down to 2 in order to add an extra black die to your dice pool, or to remove a black die from the opponent. Bear that in mind. You can always affect the opponent as well. And you have to announce it before the round starts. After the dice pools. So you're allowed to get to see what the dice pools are before you make that decision. Okay, the attacker has to declare first. So, okay. Next, mixed tactical situation. There are some cases that indicate for a die to be added or removed, and all the units involved have to comply. And I think this is, what's an example? If it's Empire versus Barbarians, every unit has to be an Empire unit in order to get the Empire versus Barbarian bonus. So if I had a Barbarian Federati mixed in to this, that would not give me the Empire versus Barbarian bonus anymore. Okay, so that's an example of what's called a mixed tactical situation. I don't know why they spell that out. I mean, it should just be, I think they were trying to be lazy in the rulebook because they put this little symbol in the rulebook, and as long as you see, it looks like an Orthodox religion symbol. And if you see that symbol, then it means that all the units have to meet that condition, or otherwise you don't get it. Sorry, it was drink time. Okay. So let me show you the rulebook real quick, and then we'll go through this and resolve this battle. So the mixed tactical is what I was talking about. It has a little cross symbol. The mixed stacks is the little Orthodox symbol. And you're going to see that in the tables that are further down. But it's basically just trying to explain to you, those situations. So we're going to form the dice pools, and I'm going to be reading through this section here. And then we actually resolve the melee round there, and then determine the victor after that. Okay. So each unit engaged in a battle initially provides 1 white die. Okay, so let me grab some dice here. So the Horde and the Limitus does not provide a white die. So for the Romans, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 white dice. And then for the Barbarians, 2, 4, 6. And remember, leaders aren't units. So as of right now, the Barbarians have more. So terrain and other factors affect the white dice as follows. So the attacker loses a die if -1 for a marsh. This is forest, so we're fine. Did they cross a straight river or ridge? They crossed a river, and I know you can't see it really well because the units are in front of it. So let's move these out of the way. Right here, I'm moving my pen along the river right there. They went into, this is the province, they attacked from here to there, and they crossed this river right here. So they lose a die for that. So I'm going to take one away. And then -1 if it's a forest. If the defender is a non-nomad barbarian, um, they only lose the river die if they were not intercepted. So if they were intercepted, they had enough time to cross the river before the intercepting troops arrived. So they do get to keep that die. And then the forest sounds like it's only if the defender is a non-nomad barbarian is there a forest bonus. So there's no dice taken away to the attacker. Amphibious land units, they actually will have an anchor on them. None of them are here in this case. They ignore the river penalty. And it says right here that if there's an interception, even if the defender has forces in place before adding intercepting units, there's no penalty. Okay, the attacker gets dice added if it's a barbarian attacker in a barbarian province versus civilized units. That is not the case in this situation. Let me check to make sure. But they moved into the Roman territory, so I'm pretty sure that that's a safe bet. Yep, that's not the case. They moved into civilized territory. Okay, so defender gets to add dice. Is there a fortified city? No. Is there a limes? Yes. So the Romans just added one more. Is there one or more hordes? Allied barbarians. I don't understand that one. I mean, there's a horde there, but that's just because of the barbarians attacking. So yeah, there's a horde. So that means they get another die. Interesting. Okay, now we do what's called a dice trade. So a white die can be traded for a black in each of these situations. Is there 2 or more elites? And there's 2 trades if you're Rome. For Byzantium, you get 2 trades if you have 4 or more elites. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 elites. That's what the diamonds are. So we get to do 2 trades. So 2 of these white dice come off and 2 black dice come on for Rome. And there are no elite units for the barbarians. Cavalry advantage. So another white die comes off, black die comes on for Rome. Empire versus barbarians. White die comes off, black die comes on. Nomads in a steppe and a fortified city. And a black die must be traded for a white die if the opponent has the heavy advantage. So if there was any black dice for the barbarians, they would have to lose it right now. If there is no black die to trade for a white one, the opponent's heavy advantage is disregarded. Event cards could cause this. So now we go into the melee round. Okay, so I'm going to move these units out of the way. And this Lemus does something. I just don't remember what it is. I know there's a section that talks about what it does. So let me just move units out of the way. Okay, so that's their dice, and these are the Roman dice, and these are the barbarian dice. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. Okay. I would swear the Lemus does something before any of this happens. Let me check real quick. And it is crazy. There's an advanced combat section that goes through all of this same combat, just with a completely different set of rules. So the Lemus has a blocking effect. All invaders must stop. If a unit counts as a unit for the Romans and defensive supporting units are present, it can be assigned a hit. If it's unsupported, there's no battle. You do a D2 check to see if it's destroyed. If the Romans succeed in intercepting inside of a province garrisoned only by a Lemus, the Lemus is destroyed and makes a D2 check as above before the intercepting stack. If you lose, so if the Romans lose this province and they ever recapture it, they put the Lemus back there at no cost. So Lemuses are removed, they're destroyed no matter what. So a couple modifications here. This Lemus, because we had to intercept it, it was destroyed before we arrived. Okay, so this is gone, and just going to put it in the destroyed pool. But we do a D2 check, so I'm going to just say anything even. So I rolled an odd. If I would have rolled an even, it would have done damage to a barbarian unit. In fact, it would have it would have inflicted a hit on an enemy. So now, since it was destroyed, it means the Romans lost the white die they got for it. Because when we're calculating the dice, that's after that check is done. So a little annoyed because that whole rule that I just read to you is in a completely different section than the combat section. And it was only because I've read the rules several times that I remembered to even go check in those areas. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. I apologize if this seems too slow for a lot of you, but that's this game. Okay, hits are simultaneous. Whoever controls the troops gets to decide their own hits. So if I do 4 hits to you, you get to decide how those 4 hits are going to be. I don't get to dictate that. Every sword is a hit. The red swords only hit in clear, steppe, or desert. This is a forest, so the red swords do not count in this situation. A hit eliminates a standard unit or damages an elite unit, which causes you to flip it over. When a stack contains both national and foreign units, the first unit eliminated must be a national one. So that's a rule I'll always forget, but be sure to remember that. And a barbarian horde can only be hit last. It doesn't eliminate the horde, but it does cause a nation to submit to its victor, which means that we could get a vassal out of the deal. All right. So yeah, there's not much more to talk about. So the attacker goes, well, that's simultaneous, but we're going to go ahead and roll for the attacker first. I'm going to get these dice out of the way. So you can see I got 1, 2, 3 hits for the barbarians with that. Okay. Now the red doesn't count because of the terrain type. So now I'm going to roll for the Romans. And these 2 belong to the Romans. And so we got 2, 3 hits for the Romans. So not good for the Romans, right? So the attacker goes first. They can force a reroll of 2 dice. So they're going to force the Romans to reroll this one. Okay. So Romans rerolled and got it again. So now they're going to make the Romans roll it again a second time. And you're allowed to do that. And I actually rolled it again. That's pretty impressive. Okay, so the Romans get 3 rerolls. And what they're going to do is they're going to choose to reroll their own black die and this one, because these both didn't do any hits at all. So that's 2 rerolls. And I rolled 2 blanks, so we're going to use the third one to roll again. And I rolled yet another blank. So as much as they got lucky in the beginning, they're not getting lucky now. Okay, so we now just have to assign hits. So 3 hits get done to the Romans. So before you're allocating your hits, it probably might be helpful to know how do the units recover. Each side will get to recover 2 eliminated units of their choice. And whoever has the most eliminated units is the loser of this battle, by the way. Um, and so you don't recover until the battle victory is determined. So it's not like you get to recover your units and then figure out who the loser is. So if it's an eliminated elite unit, it recovers damage. It's flipped. If it's a small battle that only had 2 units total, there's some modified rules. Civilized nations, once losses have been recovered, you may restore 1 elite unit by flipping it back to its elite side. So you even get to restore an elite unit. The fact that they are heavy, all that did was that would have removed a black die from the enemy. This is where the advanced die roll rules are a little nicer, because the heavy and the elite units give you bonus modifiers to your die roll, so you get a better chance of hitting. So that's where it's a little different. Okay, I think you're really going to have to decide what works best for you in this. There's a little table here that I'm trying to grab. If you did the advanced rules, for example, you have this little table here. So you can see that the Romans had 5 units, and this is the dice result. So let's say I rolled an 8. After all the modifiers, I would do 2 damage and possibly a half, depending on certain things. And then these are all the different modifiers over here on the right. And I apologize for the glare. So and see, you get +1 if you have cavalry, +1 if it's empire versus blah blah blah, and then if you have heavy advantage, you get another +1. So we would have gotten a pretty nice die roll possibly, but we only would have done 2 hits. Now we do 2 melee battles, not just 1, like in this case. So we maybe would have averaged 4 hits. So, but right now we're doing 3 hits to the Romans. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go 1, 2, eliminate it, and 3. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. And you would think the number of diamonds would mean something, but it really doesn't. But anyways, that's what I'll do. Okay, so now the Romans get to do damage, and so you could see here this doesn't count. The Romans did 1, 2, 3 hits to the barbarians. Now the problem with the barbarians is there is no. They get 1, 2, 3 hits. Those are eliminated. Okay, because there are no elite units, so those are eliminated outright. Okay, so all you do is 1 melee round, so that means it's over. The Romans lost 3. The the barbarians lost 3. The Romans lost 1, so the Romans win. The fort, the Lamius fort, does not get rebuilt, not until later. I think at the beginning of the turn or whatever, when you do reinforcement step. So we do get to recover 2 units. So this unit that was dead gets added back for the Romans, and then because they're civilized, they get to flip one of them back to full strength. Okay, and then the barbarians get to add 2 back, and then the third one is going to go back to the player board. It's currently out of the game, not forever, but just for now, and just yeah. All right. So that's the situation, and yes, the barbarians are forced to retreat. So nobody heals any more than this, and I'm picking up the Roman pieces, and I'm only setting them just slightly off camera, and I'm going to point over here on the board. This is where the battle took place. Let me get these dice out of the way. this is where the battle took place. They have to retreat at least back to here, and that's all they're going to do. They're not going to go any further. And so the horde and all of its troops will retreat back to there. But remember, this is an invasion. So that turn is done, and now they're going to invade again. And they're going to go exactly onto the same spot. There's no Lemus there to protect the Romans this time. And the Romans are down one elite unit. The barbarians are down a unit as well. But it doesn't matter. They're going to attack again. And so that's sort of how this works. And so here you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dice now, right, for the barbarians. And then for the so in this case, they're not being intercepted anymore, so they would actually lose a die because they're crossing a river. So what they could do is they could like try to go somewhere else, right? So they tried to cross a river here. Now they're going to maybe try to cross the river further down south, and that's maybe a better option so they don't lose dice. Yeah, so that's what they're going to do. They're going to move down to Helvetia, and so that means another intercept has to happen. And the only purpose of doing this is that by forcing the Romans to intercept again, they allow the barbarians to cross the river without taking a penalty. Okay, so let me move these dice out of the way. This is the territory where the battle originally took place. This territory here, they can cross the river and attack that because there's no Romans there anymore. So the Romans would have to intercept again to move down into here, and that is a mountain place. Now mountains have a stacking limit of only 3, I believe. Oh, why do I never remember? Yes, it's 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then the leader gives 2 more for 4, 5. So that's exactly the limit. It's just that the horde marker would not go with them, so he would stay behind, and I'm not sure it matters. So we'll leave the horde unit behind. Okay, so with that being said, they are going to get the 5 dice, like I said. And then we have to intercept, roll for the, so you can see I rolled a 4, but I believe I'm going to get enough to intercept because I get +3. I'm not crossing a ridge this time, even if I am going into the mountains. So the Romans made it there no problem. I get plenty of bonuses to my die roll. So the whole purpose of that, like I said, the barbarians wanted to not lose a die. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is all the Romans get. And let's go look. They have 2 or more elites. Gives them a black die. Cavalry advantage. Empire versus barbarians. And yeah, the heavy advantage isn't doing the Romans any good here. So I'm going to move, once again, move them out of the way. I'm going to roll for the Romans first, or sorry, the barbarians first. So this is the roll. So the barbarians did 2 hits. Now I'm going to roll for the Romans. I got 2 hits there, 1 hit there, and then some misses. Okay, so attacker has to go first. So they're going to force the Romans to re-roll this. And once again, I do it. And they're so dang frustrated. And finally, they succeed. Okay, So the Roman player is just going to re-roll all 3 of these black dice with all 3 of his re-rolls, and I was able to get another hit back there. So they did 2 hits to us, and we did 2 hits to them. So once again, we happen to have a damaged unit here, so we're going to go ahead and kill that one, and then this one would flip, like so. All right, so that's eliminated. This one's flipped. The barbarians would eliminate 2, and they would be forced to retreat again. But this time, the Romans bring this back, and then they get to restore one of their elite units. So basically, we ended up at a tie. Nothing changed. So now this is where it gets crazy. Now we get to do what's called a campaign. So yes, this entire freaking hour and 25 minutes, I know I spent about 30 minutes explaining rules, but the Alemanni now get to do what's called a campaign. And so a campaign is after regular combat. So the reason they got to attack twice was because they had an invasion. And now they get to do what's called a campaign because they have a leader. So when we're done with the attack steps, its leaders may continue to play by going on a campaign. They have a value from 0 to 3 on their lower right corner. So the leader here for the barbarian has a 2. Okay, so you can go in 2 campaigns. And then at the start of each campaign, a leader in his stack may be redeployed anywhere within connected friendly territory at no cost. So they can move up and down the border and just come across the border anywhere they want. A barbarian nation can never move its horde during a campaign, as it cannot be stacked with a leader. You can collect and drop off units. Units from nearby provinces can move into a province with a leader to join his stack. No other unit may move. Basically, a campaign allows a leader who has already moved and battled to move and battle with the same units again and potentially again and again as long as they remain with him. So it's a little insane. So the barbarians are going to attack 2 more times, folks. And so I'm going to move these out of the way, and let's look at the game board again. So this barbarian has been attacking from this location here. Now they can move up and down friendly territory and attack elsewhere. The problem is there is no other friendly territory. They only control that one province. So that's all they can do is just attack from that one place over and over and over again. The Romans are intercepting them, and because the Romans are intercepting them, they're doing a bang-up job of knocking them back. So unless the barbarians get a good die roll, this is going to be a really difficult challenge for them. But to be quite honest, the barbarians, the Alemannis, didn't, kill the Romans historically on turn 1 either. So this is fairly normal, I guess. When you have a barbarian tribe, don't expect to be romple stomping with them. Now, they did eliminate Roman units, and let's talk about that real quick. Every turn, they get 1 victory point. Each Bergen, Frank, Hun, or Roman eliminated in Gallia Septentrionalis, which is, of course, where all this battling's happening. So they get a victory point for eliminating a unit. And then they get 3 victory points every time they are under a foedus, meaning that, they have a federati agreement. And they get 1 victory point for income of a non-heretical Catholic province. So, so technically speaking, they eliminated a Roman troop twice. Now, the Romans got to restore them, but they did get to eliminate a troop twice. So we're talking about the green player here. So the Alemanni on turn 1 have gotten 1, 2 victory points. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just put 2 there. And That's for eliminating 2 units through the battles. So even though we're not taking territory, we're scoring points. So don't get frustrated, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Keep fighting and keep trying to break through. So we're going to do it again, and we're going to just keep flip-flopping the territory, so that way the Romans have to intercept every time. And so let's do that. We're gonna, he's going to invade with these same troops. This time the Lotharingen, the forest, and the Romans are going to try to intercept again. And I rolled an 8, which is, I know, off the camera, but the Romans successfully intercept. And here we go again, down the only road I've ever known, like a drifter. There's 5, and then here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think we successfully, nope, just 4. And all 4 of those are going to become black because none of the advantages have gone away. So I'm going to roll them all together because the white dice are the barbarians, the black ones are the Romans, and the Romans are romple stomping here. So, and let me check to see if the Romans actually score points. I don't think they do, but it's always worth a check. Every barbarian or Persian eliminated, they get a point. Oh, I didn't even consider that. So they do get a point. And what have they done? They've eliminated 2 plus 3. They've eliminated 5. So even though they're scoring points, the green player, the red player, is getting 5 points. Okay, maybe this isn't a good idea. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So maybe it's not a good idea to, be just attacking Rome like this, especially with a die roll like that. All right, so the barbarians are going to make Rome reroll these 2. That's a lot better. And of course, Rome doesn't like that roll, so they're going to reroll all 3 of these. And you can roll them one at a time. You don't have to choose to reroll 3 all at once. Okay, so as you can see, they do 1 hit to the Romans, and we're going to make it this one. So they do eliminate a Roman, and we're going to make it that way because even though it gives them a point, it actually helps the Romans to get their troops back. So the Alemanni now got a 3rd point. And what's going to happen is the Romans going to restore him, and then they get to flip 1. So now they're back to full strength. So that was the logic there. And here you can see 2, 3, 4 hits. And then 2 of them come back. So there's actually 4 units eliminated. That's 4 points. So that's the thing I'm saying is maybe we better not be feeding the bear here. So what else can they do to score points? Because obviously the Romans are kicking their butt, and they don't have enough to hit the Romans here. So we're going to put them back. Let's get the dice off. This is a much smaller stack than what we started with. I mean, it doesn't matter where they go. If they attack this one, they can intercept that. Really, your only shot is that they fail an intercept roll, which they haven't been doing. I guess you could choose to pass. I mean, why would you continue? Yeah, I scored points as the green player, but I just gave up 9 to the red player. That wasn't a good deal. So let me study this a bit more and make sure I implemented those rules correctly. We're at like an hour and a half anyways, so I need to stop the video. And that thus concludes one faction's military turn. And I said it would take about 2 videos. Granted, I don't have to explain as much in the next ones, but yes, this is going to be a long game. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching, or thanks for joining me at the table. As always, stay awesome and stay healthy and safe.